Greetings, beautiful boys and girls, and welcome to Learning with Avant-Garde Books. I hope that you are well. Today's lesson will be about Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman was born around 1820 and she died in 1913. What I want you to do is get in a very comfortable place and make sure that you're relaxed as we learn about one of the greatest women in our history, Harriet Tubman. In 1896, Harriet Tubman said, "I was the conductor of the Underground Railroad for 8 years, and I can say what most conductors can't say. I never ran my train off the track, and I never lost a passenger." So boys and girls, what was the Underground Railroad? Well, the Underground Railroad was an effort to resist slavery. It refers to the efforts of enslaved African Americans to gain their freedom by escaping bondage. Harriet Tubman was known as the Moses of her people because she helped over 300 people go from the South to the North to freedom. Harriet Tubman was named Araminta Ross at her birth, which was sometime between 1820 and 1822. Araminta, or Minty, never learned her exact birthday. Enslaved people weren't issued birth certificates, and they were prohibited from learning to read or write, so they were rarely able to keep written records or family histories. Enslaved people were regarded as property, no different in the eyes of the law than a horse, pig, or cow, or even a wagon or piece of silverware. When Araminta was about 5 years old, she was hired out by her master to care for an infant that belonged to another white family. If the baby cried, the child's mother would hit Araminta as punishment. As an enslaved child, Harriet Tubman, then known as Araminta or Minty, was forced to check muskrat traps in rivers, sometimes even in freezing weather. She also had to work in the fields, doing hard labor like an adult. She loaded timber and split fence rails. She adapted to hard work, but never to the cruelty and mistreatment in bondage. When Harriet Tubman was a young teen, a white man threw a 2-pound weight to stop a black man from running away, but hit Harriet by mistake, cracking her skull and knocking her to the ground. For years after the injury, she suffered from terrible headaches and would fall asleep at random moments. Araminta, forever disabled by the assault, came to view her disability as a blessing in disguise. She began to have visions, which she understood to be messages from God, showing her the way to freedom. In 1849, she ran away to the north, using a network of trusted people and safe houses known as the Underground Railroad. By then, she had taken her mother's first name and added it to her married name. She was known as Harriet Tubman. Harriet joined the Abolitionist movement to end slavery. Then she repeatedly risked her own liberty and journeyed back into the South to guide family members and others to freedom. Harriet Tubman passed through forests and swamps the whole time, running away from men with guns and vicious hunting dogs. She returned to the South more than a dozen times, liberating 300 people. Speaking at a women's suffrage convention in 1896, Harriet said, "I was the conductor of the Underground Railroad for 8 years, and I can say what most conductors can't say. I never ran my train off the track, and I never lost a passenger." Harriet learned the countryside so well that when the Civil War broke out in 1861, she became a valued asset to the military. She joined the Union Army, working with government troops against the Confederacy, the slave states that seceded from the Union, as a spy and scout. She would visit enslaved people on plantations and gather crucial information, such as the locations of Confederate troops or their supplies. Harriet also served as a nurse, using her knowledge of medicinal herbs and treatments to cure infections and illnesses. Diseases killed more soldiers during the Civil War than the actual fighting. A year and a half into the Civil War, President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, abolishing slavery in states that seceded from the Union. He opened up the ranks of the military, allowing nearly 200,000 black men and women to join. But one tiny black woman became the most celebrated of freedom fighters, and that was Harriet Tubman. After the war, Harriet Tubman made Auburn, New York, her home in 1859. A few years later, she married her second husband, Nelson Davis, who had been a soldier in the war. In Auburn, she took in all sorts of people in need. In 1886, she bought 2 additional houses across the street in order to help more people. 10 years later, she partnered with AME Zion Church, which renamed the rest home the Harriet Tubman Home. In 1911, she moved in to receive care, and there she spent the last 2 years of her long journey and triumphant life. Wonderful boys and girls, there is so much more that you can learn about this amazing woman, Harriet Tubman. There are monuments all over the country honoring her. Here are just 2 of them. There's one in Boston, Massachusetts, and there's also one in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Here are 2 more monuments honoring Harriet Tubman. This one on the left is in Langley, Virginia. It was erected by the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States of America. Also, in her home where she finally made it, Auburn, New York, has a beautiful statue of her there. Remember, you can learn more and research and visit some of these wonderful places honoring a great woman, Harriet Tubman. On your left, you'll see a monument that you can visit in Newark, New Jersey. And on your right, there is going to be a wonderful monument built in Beaumont, South Carolina. It is not completed yet, but when it is, it will look like the model you see there on the right. Harriet Tubman was the first African-American woman to be honored on a U.S. postage stamp. The 13-cent stamp was the first in the Black Heritage series, initiated in 1978. Also, you can see she was on another stamp in 1995. She was on the 32-cent stamp. Here is a beautiful historical marker in Dorchester County, Maryland, honoring Harriet Tubman. The Moses of her people, Harriet Tubman of the Bucktown District, found freedom for herself and some 300 other slaves whom she led north in the Civil War. She served the Union Army as a nurse, scout, and spy. Wonderful boys and girls, this concludes our lesson on the great Harriet Tubman. I hope you learned something about her life and legacy, and her strength and her courage and her dignity is something that you can have too. Parts of this presentation were read from a great book called A Black Woman Did That, 42 Boundary-Breaking, Bar-Raising, World-Changing Women, written by Malika Adero and illustrated by Shantae Timothy. I hope you can get a copy. It's available at bookstores all around the world. Well, boys and girls, thank you again for watching, learning, and listening with Avant Garde Books. I'm Cherie Hardy. Have a beautiful day.